Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
This is absolutely insane. And we need to break down what just happened because the New York Mets just pulled off one of the most shocking moves of the entire offseason. Bo Bichette is a New York Met. 3 years, $146 million, $42 million per year with no deferrals. And this came out of absolutely nowhere after Kyle Tucker broke every Mets fan's heart by signing with the Dodgers. But you know what? David Stearns wasn't about to let this offseason end in disappointment. He pivoted immediately and landed one of the best hitters available. Let me set the stage here because the timing of this is crucial. Less than an hour after Kyle Tucker signed with the Dodgers, the Mets finalized this deal with Bo Bichette. That's not a coincidence. That's a front office that had backup plans ready to execute. That's David Stearns doing what David Stearns does best, staying 2 steps ahead of everyone else. The Mets weren't going to sit around feeling sorry for themselves after missing out on Tucker. They went out and got a legitimate star who makes this lineup significantly better. Now let's talk about what Bo Bichette brings to this team, because this isn't just some consolation prize. This is one of the best contact hitters in baseball, a guy who hit .311 last season with 44 doubles, which was second in all of Major League Baseball, and he did that in only 139 games. Think about what those numbers would look like over a full 162-game season. We're talking about a potential 50-double guy who consistently puts the ball in play and drives in runs when it matters most. Here's the stat that should get every Mets fan fired up. Bo Bichette, with runners in scoring position, hit .381 with 80 RBIs last season. His OPS in those situations was over 1,000. That's absurd. The Mets have been desperate for someone who can come through in clutch situations, someone who doesn't just hit solo home runs but actually drives in runners when they're on base. Bichette is that guy. He proved it all season long with the Blue Jays, and he proved it on the biggest stage possible in the World Series, where he went 8 for 23 with a home run and 6 RBIs. And speaking of the World Series, let's address the defensive question, because I know people are going to freak out about him playing third base. Bichette has been a shortstop his entire career. He's never played third base professionally. But you know what he did in the World Series when his team needed him? He moved to second base despite being hurt and played just fine on the biggest stage in baseball. The guy is a professional. He's adaptable. He's going to figure out third base. And if he doesn't, the Mets have options. They can DH him. They can move Brett Baty to third and let Bichette DH. There are ways to make this work without compromising the lineup. Let's also talk about the contract structure, because this is actually really smart despite the massive annual value. Bichette has opt-outs after year 1 and year 2. There's a $5 million opt-out bonus, which means he's probably going to opt out after this season unless he gets hurt or has a down year. And honestly, I'm fine with that. If Bichette has a great season and opts out, the Mets got exactly what they needed for 1 year. They got a high-level right-handed bat who can drive in runs and hit for average. And if he loves it here and the relationship works out, maybe the Mets can bring him back on a longer deal next offseason. The other huge factor here is that Bichette is a right-handed hitter. The Mets desperately needed to balance out their lineup after adding Juan Soto, who bats left. Kyle Tucker would have been another lefty, which would have created even more imbalance. Bichette solves that problem immediately. Now you have a legitimate right-handed threat in the middle of your lineup who can hit for average and power. That makes this offense so much harder to pitch to because you can't just stack lefties against them anymore. Another thing that's flying under the radar is Bichette's age. He turns 28 in March. This is his prime. These are supposed to be his best years. The Mets aren't gambling on a guy who's 32 or 33 and declining. They're getting a player who should be at the peak of his abilities for the duration of this contract. That's exactly the kind of move you want to make when you're trying to win right now. And here's the absolute best part of this deal. The Mets stole him away from the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies reportedly offered around 7 years for $200 million, which works out to roughly $30 million per year. The Mets came in and said, how about 3 years for $146 at $42 million per year? Bichette took one look at that offer and said absolutely. Why would he lock himself into a longer deal at less annual value when he can bet on himself for 3 years, make way more money per season, and potentially hit free agency again in his prime? So not only did the Mets improve their own roster, they actively prevented a division rival from getting better. The Phillies just lost Ranger Suarez to the Red Sox. They needed to add impact talent, and the Mets swooped in and took one of their top targets. That's championship-level roster management. You make yourself better while making your competition worse. That's how you win divisions. Now let's talk about what this means for the rest of the roster, because there are absolutely going to be domino effects here. Brett Baty's role just became a massive question mark. The Mets are saying they might try him at first base or even in the outfield, but I think there's a much simpler answer. Trade him. Baty has real value around the league. He's young, he's controllable, he showed improvement last season, and teams are always looking for young position players with upside. The Mets need a starting pitcher and an outfielder. Baty could be the centerpiece of a trade that brings back exactly what they need. Think about potential trade packages here. The Red Sox need a third baseman, and they have outfielders to spare. Jarren Duran is a name that makes a lot of sense. A package of Baty and David Peterson for Duran could work for both sides. Duran gives you elite defense in the outfield and some speed at the top of the lineup. You could have an outfield of Carson Benj, Jarren Duran, and Juan Soto. That's a really solid defensive group with plenty of offensive upside. Or what about the Minnesota Twins? They've got Byron Buxton and Joe Ryan. Both could be available if the price is right. Imagine the Mets packaging Baty, Ronnie Mauricio, and a couple of pitching prospects for Ryan and Buxton. Suddenly you've added an ace-level starter and one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball. That would completely transform this roster. And speaking of starting pitching, the Mets still need to add there. Freddie Peralta is the name everyone keeps bringing up with the Milwaukee Brewers. If the Brewers are willing to move him, the Mets have the pieces to get a deal done. Maybe it's Baty as the headliner with some pitching prospects. Maybe it's a bigger package that includes multiple players. Either way, the Mets have the depth in their system to go get a frontline starter without gutting the entire organization. The other name to keep an eye on is Mark Vientos. Where does he fit now? You've got Yori Polano, who can play first base. You've got Bichette, presumably at third. Vientos is a DH-only type player at this point, and his value in a trade might be limited because of that. But maybe there's a team out there that sees his bat and is willing to give up something useful in return. I think the Mets would move Vientos in the right deal, especially if it helps address their outfield or pitching needs. Let's also talk about what this lineup looks like now, because it's actually pretty impressive. You've got Francisco Lindor at shortstop, Marcus Semien at second base, Bo Bichette at third, Jorge Polano at first, Juan Soto in the outfield, and hopefully Carson Benj getting regular playing time. That's a lineup with depth, balance, and the ability to score runs in multiple ways. You've got power with Soto and Polano. You've got contact and clutch hitting with Bichette. You've got speed and defense with Benj. This is starting to look like a complete offensive unit. And defensively, if the Mets can add the right outfielder, they could actually be pretty solid. Benj is a plus defender in center. If you add someone like Jarren Duran or Byron Buxton, you've got elite defense up the middle. Soto isn't great in the outfield, but if you surround him with plus defenders, it's manageable. The infield should be fine with Lindor, Semien, and Polano all being at least average or better defenders. What I love most about this move is that it shows the Mets aren't messing around. They lost out on Kyle Tucker, which was devastating. But instead of sulking or settling, they immediately pivoted and landed another impact player. That's the kind of aggressive, proactive roster building that wins championships. David Stearns has been criticized for being too cautious, for not spending Steve Cohen's money. Well, he just dropped $146 million on Bo Bichette. That's not cautious. That's going all in. And Steve Cohen deserves credit too, because he clearly told Stearns to do whatever it takes to make this team better. Cohen didn't buy the Mets to finish in third place. He bought them to win World Series, and every move this offseason reflects that mentality. First it was Juan Soto last year. Now it's Bo Bichette this year. And there are still more moves coming because this team isn't finished building. So where do the Mets go from here? They need to finalize their outfield situation. They need to add at least one more starting pitcher, and they need to figure out what to do with guys like Baty and Vientos, who might not have clear roles anymore, but those are good problems to have. Those are the problems contending teams deal with when they're adding talent and trying to optimize their roster. The bottom line is this: Bo Bichette is a New York Met, and this team just got significantly better. He's a proven clutch hitter who performs on the biggest stages. He's in his prime. He provides right-handed balance to the lineup, and he was taken directly away from a division rival. This is exactly the kind of move championship teams make. Now the Mets need to keep building, keep adding pieces, and finish what they started. But as of right now, this offseason just went from disappointing to really exciting in the span of about an hour. David Stearns just showed everyone he's not backing down, and the Mets